Welcome to the Redirect Podcast, where we discuss trends and topics in the search marketing space and how it impacts your brand. I'm Jason Dodge, founder and CEO of Black Truck Media and Marketing. My special guest today is Brie Anderson. Brie is the founder of Beast Analytics. I have had the privilege of knowing you for, man, it's been a number of years back when I was first brought out to a town that many of you may know, you may not know, which is Wichita, Kansas, to speak at a local AMA event. So that's how we met. But welcome to the Redirect Podcast, Brie. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, super excited to be here. I would say probably most people know Wichita from I'm going to Wichita, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. But other than that, probably not a lot of people knowing where Wichita is in Kansas. But you do
Mhm.
because you came and
That's
spoke at
right.
an AMA event. And
Yeah.
yeah, we've been connected for a while. So you've seen my journey firsthand. I'm sure it's
I
been a confusing one at times.
No, it's great. No, I think it's great. I love seeing I think part of that's just like business ownership and leadership. I love seeing um, how people pivot or shift and evolve, if you will, over time, and really where you find, I guess, your niche and your calling, and really what you gravitate towards. So I think for me, it's been awesome. You've been a very valuable resource, not only to myself, but I think many in the SEO space, in the SEO industry, especially over the last few years here with all of the looming changes that, oh my gosh, UA is going to go away. How are we going to measure things? And then GA4 and everything. And so I'd love for you to I'm going to give you the mic, introduce yourself, what you do, and then I'll get into the gritty details of what it is that we're going to try and cover today.
Yeah, sounds great.
Cool.
I've been doing marketing since I was 16, like digital marketing specifically, but some traditional and all that. I started working with bands. So my friends had bands and MySpace died and they were like, "How are we gonna know? How are people gonna know when we play shows and how much our t-shirts are gonna be?" And I was like, they could probably just guess because you play every Thursday at Velocity and your shirts are $15 and they have been every show for the last years. But you are very important. So yeah, let's figure this out. So I made some really bad websites, and then got really involved in music promotion on Facebook. Worked for some shady record labels, all sorts of fun stuff. So that's what I was doing, and I ended up working for a music startup that went out for Y Combinator. They didn't get it, but during that time, the founder was like, "Hey, you should probably drop out of college, move to Nashville, and do this full time." And I was like, "Yeah, no, my parents would
No.
kill me. What are you thinking?" Um, I mean, like would have been the dream at the time, but that was when I really realized that, like, oh, this is something that people are looking for. So at the time I was a freshman in college. I went to school, I was playing soccer, I was going to get a comms degree with a interest, like I wanted to go work on the radio, like that. I'm really glad I didn't end up
Yeah.
going down that path. But so I found the only school really in Kentucky at the time, which is where I went to college, that was offering a social media degree. It was a digital marketing degree, but with a focus of social media. So I was one of the first people to graduate with that degree there in Kentucky. And during college, I've kind of just been a yes man for a while. I was just saying yes to everything, had a few
Mhm.
internships, interned at corporate, interned in-house, interned at agencies. And
Yeah.
then I went to an agency right out of college and went and, did the agency thing where I got to go to every local AMA event, which is where we met. So that was really, I mean, I say early on in my career, but like as an adult, that was very,
Mhm.
very early on in my career, was working at the agency. I went, started with social media because that's what I had been doing for all of these bands and music related companies. But when you go from creating content at like Warped Tour to creating content about like sandwich shops, it's a bit of a shock to the system. Uh,
Yeah.
um, yeah,
How does
you
one
don't.
transition from
No, you
that to like you
don't.
should buy a sandwich?
Yeah, I mean, and that was honestly that was probably the best client I had because the rest were like blast resistant buildings or storage pods or
Mm,
all of these things. So I found out very quickly I'm not actually a creative person that like fosters that kind of like it was so easy for me because I love music. And
yeah.
I loved that scene. I loved being a part of, talking with bands and that kind of stuff. That was so fun. But so very quickly I was like, oh no, I can't do this. But I'm happy to help in whatever other way you need me to. So organic social turned into paid social, managing that kind of stuff, turned into like kind of Google ads and then eventually organic. But like for me, the really when I think about like where things changed was 19 years old, doing an internship, and they were like, hey, here's $1,000 for this nonprofit client that wants to run Google ads. Can you, like, you're gonna head this up, you're gonna run it, whatever. And I was like, that could pay my rent for like 3 months. We're sure you just want to hand that over, right? That sounds terrifying. And I was so terrified about losing these people's money, especially it's a nonprofit. They don't have a bunch of money to like burn. So that's when I learned Google Analytics. Because I was terrified. Like I wanted to know where every single dollar went. And I was able to show a return of $3 for every dollar investment on that
Yeah.
campaign. And then it all started making sense, right? Like what I've always enjoyed about digital marketing is that there's a number attached to everything and every number is correlated with a lever, right? So if our impressions are high but click-through rates are down, we know that has something to do with our creative. So what kind of, and like the call to action. So what changes are we going to make there? If people are getting to the landing page but they're not, you know what I mean? Like all of these things,
Hmm.
I was able to go, okay, so this lever needs to be moved and this lever needs to be moved and this is where we're losing money. Um and so I did that, at an agency for a while, and then I left the agency because I kind of wanted to go out. I knew I wanted to go out on my own at some point.
Hmm.
And an opportunity came to be the director of the digital marketing program at the local tech school. They just started it and they needed someone to kind of head it up. So I did that, taught digital marketing, um, you know, uh, and all that kind of fun stuff. COVID hit. We were trying to start our family and they needed us to come back in person. And I was like, can't do it. So that's
Mm,
when at that time, so this is 2020, right? GA4 comes out October 2020. And I'm
hmm.
like about
Hmm.
to go out on my own. And all these pieces start to fall together where it's like, well, I know, and I'm sure we'll get into this. I knew that GA4 had to stay. All the like the writing was on the wall. It was going to be a change that had to be made. It was going to have to stay. People were going to have to use it. UA wasn't going to be an option.
Hmm.
Um, and so I kind of just stuck it out through everybody hating it, and all of its growing pains because there surely were some. There still are.
Still are,
Uh,
right?
there still are, but so that's kind of how I got to where I am today. Is like, I that was a way to kind of create a name for myself, I would say,
Yeah,
as someone who works with numbers, right? Like GA4, truthfully, like setups and how it works and functions, that's such a small part of what I do, but it's the most important right now, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so yeah, now here we are.
No, that's really good. And I always love hearing like call it an origin story, but right, the like going from the Warp Tour to sandwich shops. That's just like what that's just we're gonna name that this. That's a
All right,
spin-off
sounds great.
podcast right there. But I think too, like pivotal times in transitioning your career and stuff I think that's super important because it gives us all context as to like how you think, how you function, like the reasons why you do what you do, and everybody has that, right?
Yeah.
Um, so when it comes to GA4 specifically, and what Beast Analytics does, and I think you're right, that setup is critical, right? And it's something that over the last year and a half, we've experienced it, right? We have our own checklists that we go through, and it's like, man, these things should be, set up this way. And, we've done some talks on it and some webinars on it and helping educate others, certainly in not only the local regional market, if you will, but a national level too. I don't think as the super in-depth, that you get. Um, and recently, I think what I've been the most curious about, and really what sparked my interest in saying, hey, I need to have Brie on the redirect, is GA4 specifically for SEO. So I want to talk about that. So I want to
Yeah.
talk about, like, what's your take on GA4 for SEO, reporting, because I think there's definitely a lot of, like, it's not so much do's and don'ts, but it's like anything in analytics and data, right? Is just because you can measure it doesn't mean that you should. Or if you don't measure it, is it really, like, or if you don't track it, is it really measurable? Um, and then also, man, 2024 attribution is murky anymore, right? Especially if you're running across multiple channels, multiple platforms. It no longer is, and it hasn't been this way for a long time. People have thought this have been snowed, but, like, I've said it countless times. Like, it's no longer I put $1 in and I got $5 out. It's I put 50 cents in over here, 25 over here, 25 over here. That's 3, 4 different lever pulls. Now I get $5 back, right? And so telling that story with data is becoming harder. And then you toss a platform shift in there. I mean, fundamentally, UA to GA4 is way different. So when you talk specifically to SEOs or those who care about reporting on organic traffic, what do you feel are the biggest, like, what do you think are the biggest opportunities that are missed? Like, when you jump into somebody's reporting, whether it's cadence or how GA4 is set up, like, talk me through that a little bit.
Yeah, so I think, there's on honestly there's a ton. And the reason that I focused on GA4 SEO, one is because most of my friends are SEOs, and so
Hey.
yeah. And so they all, need to learn GA4, but they don't have the time. Like, let's face the reality here. We had 10 years to osmosis universal analytics, right? Like, as an SEO, it's not like, so you went out and you're like, okay, I gotta learn Google Analytics. It's like over time, like, you interacted with it and you started to figure it out, and now all of your reports, like, it became second nature. You knew where they were, you knew
Mm-hmm.
what everything meant, right? You had 10 years of that, and then all of a sudden Google goes, hey, by the way, we're not doing that anymore.
No,
And
just an about
and
face, right?
right. And, like, think of the last 10 years. Not only is this thing changing to be completely something new, but, like, your job has shifted greatly over the last 10 years as well. So,
Oh
and
my
and
God.
arguably gotten harder. So if that's the case, right? So now we are so focused on what we have, like, what our expertise is, and staying up with that. Now you have to throw in this other wrench of, now I have to learn this whole platform and figure out, like, how do I get the same reports and all of that, right? So really the idea behind GA4 SEO was, you don't have the time. I get it. You don't have the time to learn the whole platform, why it works the way it works, how it works. What, it's really the course, right? So I created a course. I've created a website for it, but um, the idea is, these are the things you need to know to be able to attribute value to organic, monitor the changes that you've made to your strategies, evaluate the content that you've created, right? That's really what we focus on. So we focus on things like, something that's really hard in GA4 for absolutely no reason is, like, what's the impact of the content we've created on the buyer cycle?
Right.
Not very easy to see, not very easy to see at
Oh,
all, right? So
yeah.
it's the roundabout ways that we've had to figure it out, of creating, like, custom audiences or using segments and explore, because that's the only way that you're going to get retroactive data on that specific audience, is to create a segment and explore, which is so silly and frustrating. But, if anybody who's ever visited this page, so now, or somebody within, so for instance, if it's blogs, if you're focused on,
Mm-hmm.
like, how do blogs impact the buyer cycle, well, then we create a segment. Anybody who's ever visited a blog right? And then we're going to compare that to people who haven't and see, are conversion rates higher or lower? Well, now we can turn around and tell the client, hey, by the way, this educational content is so impactful to the buyer cycle.
Yeah.
They're so much more
Yeah.
informed.
Hmm.
Or even if it's just, you know, this like this specific kind of article, this type of pillar content, this comparison content, right? That's a big one people do, like our product versus competitor.
Yeah. Yep.
This content is so impactful and has a, these folks go on to convert, or whatever that might look like for you, right? Or tracking
Yeah.
page speed. For some reason, there's no page speed in GA4. There was in Universal Analytics. So how are we going to do that? That's really what I'm focused on is, okay, let's scrap the whole, we have to learn this entire platform, how it works, blah, blah. And instead, let's figure out these are the things you need to know and how you can make it accessible moving forward. And really customizing the experience for SEOs.
Which I love. And I really like that approach just for a couple different reasons. I always say, I think certainly as a business owner of an agency, even though we're in the SEO space and we do technical stuff, my world isn't consumed every day by technical crawls and digging into data. Like, no, my role also is to run the business.
Right.
And sometimes I don't need to know how the sausage is made, quite frankly. I
Yeah.
just need to know that it's getting made. And whether that's a great or a poor analogy for GA4, but like to your point, like I just need to know where to go to get the info that I need to be able to make decisions, or where my client needs to go to get the information that they need to make decisions. And that's the purpose of analytics 101. Like that is a 101. Like, what's the purpose of
Yeah.
analytics? It's that right there,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And to be fair, like I started with a course that did cover like why are we making the changes? What are the right? I have that
Mm-hmm.
course for people that are interested in like, okay, fundamentally, what is all of this? How does it work? But I wanted to get into the nitty-gritty of like how do you use this for decision making? Because again,
Okay.
like I said, GA4 is what people are seeing right now as like what I do. But in reality, it's such a small part of what I do because what I actually do is consult people on like, how do you make better use of your dollars, right? How do you be
I
more
got you.
strategic? How do you use your data to make decisions? And so that's what GA4 SEO is okay, like if we're focusing on SEO, how do we use what we have for better decision making, for better monitoring, for better insights and all of that?
Yeah. No, I agree. What are you finding are some of the best reporting functions for that, even like at a base level for, when we're trying to report on organic?
Well, the one thing that I love is that you can create reports and add save filters to them. So you can create custom reports and then save filters. So you can create those like audiences, like I was saying, for instance, and in the reports section, edit any report that you're on, or you could even create a new report if you wanted, but any report that you're on, you can edit it, filter for a specific audience or whatever conditions you want, and then save it. And then it's always going to look the way that you've created it. But also, then there's the library feature, in the report section. You can go
Hmm.
in there and create a collection, which the collections are what make up your navigation. And you can create a collection for just like organic reports, for instance. So one thing that people don't really take into consideration is that any changes that you make in that report section are reflected in everybody for everyone who has access to that GA4 property, right? So if you go
Mm.
in and you
It's
save a
property level.
report, yeah. So if you go in and you save a report with an organic filter, now everybody that goes in. So you always save your reports as new reports, not as current report, right? So save it as a
Yeah.
new report. I always just like put organic and then keep the same name that it had. when I save them as new reports.
Hmm.
And then, yeah, you go into the library and create a collection. You can create a collection of organic only reports and drop them all in there. You have Search Console reports. You can drop them in there as well. And so now when you get into GA4, right there in the navigation, once you go to the report section, it just has all of your reports. And now you don't have to go searching for them over and over again and customize them every time and add the filters, yada, yada.
Let me ask the question. Uh, can you do that and then have it apply to other properties as well, or is it by property?
It's by property.
Dang
Yeah.
it.
So
Yeah, dang
that's
it.
something that's been really frustrating and interesting. So I don't know if you ever used this in Universal Analytics. Did you ever use the like custom dashboards in Universal?
Loosely, our world, I would say, probably like so many, right? You're porting it, you're using GA for what it is, and then you're doing the visualization in
Somewhere
Looker,
else.
in Power BI, somewhere else.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. So well with the custom dashboards that we had in Universal Analytics was a very rudimentary tool that it wasn't great, but you could import, like people could publish templates and you could import those templates into your
Yes.
custom dashboard, right? So when I saw the explore section of GA4 and the fact that they started it with these are templates, right? These are reporting templates and then templates for e-commerce, for gaming, whatever. I was
Hmm.
very hopeful that they were going to publish something similar, right? Like these are or like come out with something similar where I could like publish a template and then I could import it to all of my properties, or I could like, you know, give it to other people to use.
Yeah.
We don't see that yet. And yeah,
Okay.
everything is done at the property level, which is oh, annoying to say the least.
Yeah, totally. What's your, maybe a loaded question? I don't know. Like, what's your take on reports versus Explore? Because I think early on, I remember GA4 rolled out, let's just even call it V1 when it was still very, very beta. Explorer was ugly. Personally, I still think Explorer is ugly. Um, but what's your take on that?
Yeah,
Explorer versus like reports.
yeah. So Explorer is still ugly, to be fair. It
Yeah.
definitely is. I always say it's like if like Looker Studio had a baby, like it's very much that
Yeah.
where it works similarly but like not well enough.
Hmm.
It's like still kind of a spreadsheet in a sense, but you can add some visualizations if you want. um but here's the difference though, is that reports, all the reports that you see in that report section, that's aggregated data. So that's
Mm.
data that Google has taken, they've anonymized, they've kind of mixed it all up, and then they spit it out. What we see in Explore is unaggregated data. So it's it's a lot more correct, I would say,
Hmm.
and reliable than the data that we're seeing in reports. It's, one thing that we got with GA4 is that the data is not sampled. Um, unless
Yeah.
somebody came with like cookieless browsing or something.
Hmm.
Um, but so you're really getting all of the data in Explore, and it's probably as accurate as you're going to get unless you start pulling from APIs. Obviously, if you pull from the APIs, that data is also unaggregated most of the time.
Hmm. Okay.
But
Okay.
um but in Explore, I use it for more in depth. Like reports is kind of what I would use as like overviews, right? Like
Okay.
everything's kind of an overview. It's pretty hard to filter. Um, Still, it's a mess.
Yeah.
But yeah, Explore, the main reason that I've used Explore for a lot of clients is the fact that it's unaggregated data. But I will say the one thing that, just to get this out there, in your settings under data retention, right, you have an
Hmm.
option.
Hmm.
So it's set to 2 months by default, right?
Hmm.
You can change it to 14 months. Talk to a privacy expert, make sure you're allowed to do it, you're disclosing it, and your cookie policies, all that kind of fun stuff. Okay, disclaimer over. Now, that directly creates the data sets though in Explore. So if it's set to 2 months, you can only look at 2 months of data in Explore. If it's set to
Mm.
14 months, you can go back to 14 months, but because that data is unaggregated. Now, your reports section, you'll have your data. So I've had GA4 on my site since 2020. I can go back all 3 years and see my data, but not in Explore. In Explore, I can only see 14 months of data because of that setting. So it's really
And
important to go change that if you
yeah,
can.
because the retention setting, that's one of those, I would say that's one of those default things we're always looking at. We're like, what's the retention?
Mm-hmm.
What does this look like? And in addition to toggling on or off standard features and functions from an event tracking perspective, but um that really impacts your user related data or the user actions. Is that a fair statement, or how would you define like what the retention really impacts?
Yeah, so the retention, the easiest way to kind of break it down is like it connects a user to, yeah, an event, and everything in
Yep.
GA4
Yep.
is an event.
Yep.
Yeah. So again, it's that like unaggregated data. Once you aggregate it, those users aren't technically connected to their specific events. They've been put into a pool of.
Well, yeah, which is kind of a like it's basically a vague statement. We know it's all of that is like Google washing their hands of any data
Yeah,
retention
yeah.
and air quotes privacy. But
Hmm.
it doesn't mean that you wouldn't, past 14 months you wouldn't have access to like events that got triggered. It's that they're not going to be at the user level. Is that correct?
Yeah, so really what it does, so outside of Explore, right? So if you read the documentation, Google says, "Hey, you're gonna have all of your standard reports you will still have after 14 months." That's most everything in that report section, unless you've gone in and created custom reports. You can't go in and add like specific dimensions because those start to get right. They're detaching that user from the event,
Mm-hmm.
so there are specific things that you won't be able to use. um but yeah, really in Explore you don't get the option though past 14 months. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Where I thank you. I think that's really helpful because there's a bunch of weird language around that.
yeah,
I know when we first initially were jumping into it, we were like, "Ooh, what is that?" But oh, that sounds real weird, doesn't it? And
yeah,
because at the end of the day, if what you care about is more like traffic signals that have led to conversion,
yeah,
great. If you're worried more about post 14 months or pre 14 months user level path that led to conversion, that's where it gets a little funky.
right, right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, how are you on what's your feeling on like data warehousing with GA4? Have you dipped your toes into that too much in terms of like connecting to BigQuery and stuff like that, or no?
I mean, I have it set up for my site just more
Yeah.
so because I was trying to learn. To be honest, I'm not like, I don't know SQL. I don't, you know what I mean?
Same, same.
Like, mostly when it comes to warehousing, it's mostly for our bigger clients that,
Yeah.
and then we just, but even then, like you have to understand like the tokens, how the tokens work when you pull things into Looker, and then you're doing more math than necessary. I don't know. So
Yeah.
yeah, to long story short, I don't do a ton of warehousing, to be honest. I set up the connections because it's very, very easy to do, even if you've never used BigQuery. It's really easy to set it up. So I've done that. I think, for some people it really does make sense. For others it doesn't,
Yeah. Yeah.
to be honest. So we kind of, I know we haven't gotten there yet, but the UA data going away, right? So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
coming up
Yep.
quickly. Um, so what I've really recommended for people is to sit down, and this was my favorite thing about GA4 coming out, was that everybody started from zero. Okay, let's be
Same.
honest, it was shit. But
I
it it
mean, it was a
it
hall
forced
pass, right?
yeah, it forced everyone to sit down and go,
That's right.
okay, so what do we really need to track? What do we really need
Exactly.
to make sure is working? How, like, what reports are we going to be using? Was any of this working previously? Because, those universal analytics, accounts were 10 years old. People would set things up, leave them, change things, but it never got cleaned up in a sense. Analytics has
Mm-hmm.
been one of those things, which I think we're going to see far less of this now with the rollout of GA4. Analytics has always been one of those things that got passed from team to team. Nobody wanted responsibility
Nope.
for it.
Nope.
Marketing was going to send it over to comms. Comms sent it to IT.
Yeah,
IT said
IT.
no. Yeah. You know,
Yeah.
so, but I do think we're going to see less of that. So that's good. But so because of that, though, I have never been in, I can confidently say this, an analytics account that's more than 3 years old that somebody can tell me everything that's set up in there and why it's set
Mm-hmm.
up and
Mm-hmm.
how it's set up. I've never seen it. Um, and so that was a good thing with GA4. Now, if we have that conversation with ourselves, we sit down, we go, okay, what are our business goals? Are we tracking those? Check. What are our like um oh my gosh, I'm department goals,
Objectives.
right?
Yeah,
Like
department goals. Yeah.
market as
Mm-hmm.
marketers, what are our goals? And then like on a personal level for these specific campaigns, what are the things that I think are going to make a difference? Okay, all those things tracking. Great. Once we have that, then you can look at UA and go, okay, so I'm going to have to be able to compare this to something year over year, 3 years
Mm-hmm.
over 3 years, whatever. I just need those reports. Honestly, those are the
Exactly.
reports you need because most people were using UA. And like, I can tell you the 3 reports that I ever looked at in UA.
So let's go there, right? I mean, we talked about that. I think that I had two major goals. I was like, there's a couple different routes I want to go. Certainly, I want to talk about GA4 SEO from the role of like, I'm an SEO. What do I really need to know here, right? Because
Right.
like, and the way in which we set it up from Black Truck's perspective is, I would say we're heavy GTM and GA4
Yeah.
integration for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah.
Modification of events we know is way easier. um However, the big one too is like our whole goal is from an integrated perspective, from an integrated digital realm. And when I say integrated for what we do, both on the organic and the paid side,
Mm-hmm.
is we want to be tracking as closely the same things
Yeah.
as much as possible, right? A lead gen is a lead gen is a lead gen. We just want to know what, right, where it came from.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, on the side of sunsetting UA data, right? So
Mm-hmm.
UA got sunsetted in July of 23.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, originally Google was like, you're going to have 6 months to access that data. Everybody in the community threw their hands up in the air and said, what the hell? As we normally do. Google came back and said, actually, you get a year.
Yeah.
Well, we're staring that down, right? And
Yep.
so one thing that kind of came up in discussion with a few of our clients was basically we're asking the question of, do you care?
Mm-hmm.
We've had some that have been on GA4 to your point for 3 years. Some of them just are inside of a year. We've got a year look back. And so we asked the question openly, like, do you care? How far back do you want to go? Now, once you get that out of the way, now you answer the question of what is important for you to be able to know and to be able to access. Granted, that's a slippery slope,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that we on this conversation can help determine. We know that those platforms, UA to GA4, were apples to oranges.
Mm-hmm.
They're vastly different. The way things are measured, some of the way the naming conventions. So if you're trying to do data recall from 4 years ago, let's say 5 years ago, what in your mind, what in your opinion would be like, what are some good base level UA report pieces that brands should be considering doing a data dump on? Data dump being anything, whether you're dumping it to BigQuery, CSV, and uploading it to Sheets, it doesn't matter. Let's not talk about what I want to do with it. That's a whole other discussion.
Yeah.
From just capturing the data, like, what's your opinion? Because you don't want to capture everything, but like,
Yeah.
what's going to be important, right?
Yeah. And I think it's having data for data's sake, which like we've really kind of held on to. and it can be argued either way, but I think
Hmm.
really what it
Hmm.
comes down to is, what are the things that we're looking at over and over again that in theory at some point maybe we want to be able to look back 5 years and see what our trend is because we want
Yeah.
to get a promotion or something, whatever that might be.
That's right.
Um, so, but I really think like as kind of like it feels lame, but it's like the most basic things: sessions,
Hmm.
users, revenue, leads. But even then, you still have to make that disclaimer of like these things are measured differently. So like sessions, if you're going to do that, make sure you map it to total sessions in GA4 because this actual sessions in
Hmm.
GA4 is engaged sessions, and that's a whole other conversation. So like you have to make sure you're mapping it to the right thing. Same thing with users. It needs to be the total
Total
users instead of
users.
active users. Lead gen, well, it's like how did you measure it in GA4 or in UA? You need to mark that down. And then how are you measuring it in GA4? You need to mark that down. So basically what I've done with clients is, yeah, well, I do an export into Google Sheets, and we make Looker Studio reports and we just annotate everything. Like, hey,
Hmm.
by the way, this is how it was set up in Universal Analytics. This is how it's set up in GA4. Every metric has an annotation, and that way there's no like confusion around it. But like I said, I can tell you the 3 or 4 reports that I went into UA every time I went in there. It was very rare that I was going
Yeah.
outside of those things.
Yeah.
But then like obviously you have to be cognizant of like I'm one person. So
Hmm.
if you're working with a team or a client, obviously have that conversation with them as well. But I think what you'll find is everyone wants to keep all of the data, but like in reality, we were always using a fraction of the data. So yeah, I think but really it comes down to like you're pulling through the date, pull through the source medium, pull through the campaign because you're doing paid, uh and then like yeah, our really basic user session, and then whatever that conversion piece is for you.
Yeah.
Other than that, we're not doing a ton landing pages.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's super helpful. It's hard, right? It's nebulous. Like you said, you are one person, I'm one
Yeah.
person. We have opinions on it. I think you hit the nail on the head though. Like we were accessing a lot of data before, and I'll get to that. I'll make sure I come back to that. Which didn't make it good or bad, right?
Right.
And if
Yeah.
anything, if you think about it and you look at the way that attribution has gone and privacy policies, and now we have a new platform and everything, and we're having to story tell the data differently. Like, yeah, maybe because we could measure everything, that wasn't a great thing either because then when certain channels start to underperform,
Yeah.
it's not the analytics fault at that point. It could be the platform's fault because it's not passing that data variable through anymore. Or like,
Mhm.
and then you as the digital marketer are being looked at of like, well, why isn't this channel? Or like, why aren't we generating leads? And you're like, no, I know for a fact that like Meta, our ads are generating leads, but I can't control the way in which they model their data and it doesn't pass through. I mean, like
Yeah.
now we're in this, it's like a conundrum, right? so
Mhm.
so I think when you go back to looking at back to the UA backup, it's answering the question, how far back do you want to go? Why is that important? We've had a bunch of discussions recently where we've been fortunate, maybe some brands we've worked with have gone through acquisitions and they want to know like pre-acquisition, post-acquisition. Okay, that's important. Some of it's a CYA, like you were saying. It's a promotion. It's an
Mhm.
advancement. See where we were at. But then when it comes down to the metrics, it that's where it comes down to individual teams or individual what and maybe you start with, okay, what are you reporting on monthly now in
Yeah,
GA4?
right.
and go back and find, to your point, um, it was sessions before. Well, it's total sessions now, and just
Yeah,
making sure
yeah.
you have that matrix in front of you
Yeah.
doing that. No, this super helpful stuff. I really appreciate it. You being here on the podcast, that's been awesome. You've been a wealth of information for, again, not only myself, but I think a lot of our industry colleagues and folks out there. So I wanted to thank you for that.
Of course, I appreciate it. No, I like sharing, sharing what
Hmm.
I'm learning.
Hmm.
It's kind of like a record log for me too. So maybe I'll remember some of it. Who knows?
Absolutely. I mean, but to your point, like everyone wants to keep all the data, or they think that they do.
Hmm.
So it's like if I hear you, it's like forest through the trees. The challenge is to ask the question, but why do you need to measure
Yeah.
that?
Oh,
Like, are you sure? Are you sure? Because we can, but it doesn't mean that we should.
yeah. Are you going to be making decisions based on this? Basically, is what it comes
I love
down
it.
to.
Yeah.
Like what map this to a decision right now. And we like I'm cool. But if we can't map it to a lever that we're going to be pulling,
Hmm.
we don't need it.
And I think that's an interesting one, like kind of as a closing statement here, like mapping it to the lever, meaning the decision lever
Yeah.
internally, not, let's make sure everybody understands it, not the lever that's being pulled on the marketing side to make the interaction happen. It's what lever is driving the internal business decision and organizational decision. You're flipping the model that is normally, right, the normal model. You're flipping it on its head and saying, whoa, hold up. Let's go business intelligence first,
Yeah.
and then walk it back.
Yeah, because you only have the ability to make so many changes yourself. I could say, hey, I'm gonna track the URL slugs for whatever. And it's like, yeah, but they're never gonna change those. So what's the point? I mean, that's
Right.
a really bad
Right.
example, but you know what I mean? Like it could really come down to like, does this picture have an alt text or not? Every picture on here, we can track that in GTM. Sick, yeah, we can do it. But like, if you're never going to get the buy-in to change that,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like,
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. You have to draw the line somewhere.
yep, yep.
Yeah. No, that's good. So I really appreciate your time, but where can people find out more about you, hear more about you? You have been speaking on a lot of different stages over the last couple of years on these subjects, but where can people learn more about you and what you do?
Yeah, so beastanalyticsco.com or just Google Brie E. Anderson, was an SEO in a past life. So all that's me. I hang out on Twitter the most though. So if you want to chat, Twitter's where I'm at. And
All
then
right.
GA4SEO.com for
Awesome.
that course.
Well, that wraps up this edition of the Redirect Podcast with my special guest, Brie Anderson from Beast Analytics. Thank you, everyone, for listening in. And until next time, good luck. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Redirect Podcast. If you like what you heard today, additional episodes can be found at blacktruckmedia.com/podcast or wherever you get your podcasts.